So first thing we're going to do, so we're going to look at how we can use comps and particularly the button, the container, the slider, and maybe the field depending on whether we have time today. So let's go ahead and put a button on here and a slider. Let's look at the button and the slider. Okay, so each one of these things are actually a component, right? And if you go, most components have sub items inside them, right? So if you scroll into this button, you can see that there is other things in here. This button is actually created by the main thing that interfaces with you is this panel, and it has its own settings, and then there's a expression that has some settings here that grabs the input value and multiplies it by the thing coming on the input. We'll go over that later. There's a select, there's an output, there's a background, which is what is says button, right? So if I want to change the text to this button, I would go here, I would dive inside the button, and the simplest way would be for me just to grab this background, grab the text here, and change it. Push me. Now you can see it doesn't fit. So I'd have to go in here and I'd have to change the settings of this to make it fit. One easy way is to grab the font size and bring it down. Another thing you could do is on the common here, I can change the resolution of this button. Right now it's set as the parent width and height. So actually I'd want to do it here, the parent width and height. This is the parent object, right? Anything, any component, the objects inside of that component are children of the component above it, right? So the resolution of this is automatically set by default to be the parent.width and the parent.height. So I could come out of this button, I could go here and I could change the resolution of the button from the common tab. No, not from the common tab. Where? Look. Well, layout, thank you. The layout tab. Here, width and height. I can change that to 100, say, by 50. And so now it's a rectangular button, and so I have more room for me to put text here. Right? Yeah. So go ahead and actually let's dive out of the button. Let's split our layout here to 2. So I'm going to close my palette browser to give me some more room. And I'm going to split my layout. And now I want to, let's go over here, hit the parameters to close that. And let's dive inside the button on this side. So now this is outside the button on this side, and this inside the button on this side. Okay, I just realized I didn't plug my laptop in. I'm fine now, but I won't be in about 30 minutes. Oh boy. Where is our nearest outlet?
I ran an extension cord over there. Oh, yeah, this thing.
There it is. Okay. So, what was I doing? What was I doing? Oh, I was going to show you how everything is changing when you actually engage with this button. What is happening on the inside? So if I on the outside here on my button, I make viewer active so I can actually engage with that. You can see that a couple things happen. It has a rollover state, and you can see that here on the panel. And it has a on and off state, which currently it's on. That would be off. So, and each one of those creates, it has rollover off, it has on, rollover on, and it has off. And all of those 4 different states are, they are parsed by this expression here, parameters. It's saying, give me the input value plus 2 times the input. This is the part that I couldn't get good info about what it meant. Do you have any idea, Shay, about the 0, 1, 0 here?
No idea.
Darn it.
It must have to do with selecting, like looking for a mouse input specifically. It's the only thing that does though.
Yeah.
I know they have different settings for touch inputs, like touchscreen.
Right. So, okay. Actually, all right. So first of all, what's coming out of it has nothing to do with what this expression is doing. Because you can see coming out of the panel, we have a select and then the output. And those are on a completely different tree than this expression. This expression is actually interfacing with this table here, which defines the colors based on the state that it's in. So let's see. So here, input value plus 2. So if I roll over it, the input value into that is, okay, wait a second. I see. All right, so that points to, that gives me an output of 3, sorry, so if it's off, it gives me an output of either 0 or 2, which is because what's coming out right now, all of these are zeros, so that the input value is 0 plus 2, and it gives me that. So what that does is it points to a specific place here. So when this is off, this is pointing to font size and background color, and then you can see when I go on, that background color that loads is a different color. And when I roll over, it's a different color. And when I roll over when it's on, it's even brighter color. So off is the darkest background at 0.23. Then the next brightest would be the rollover with it off at 0.4. Then the on. Then the rollover on is the brightest at 0.6. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused on this expression. I'll have to come back to you guys about that, about what that means. But I think I'm going to assign you, there's a tutorial video on this that I based a lot of my lesson on today that I'd like you guys to watch. And there's a guy named Matthew Reagan who's one of the major TouchDesigner gods out there. And he'll teach you how to create a button, a slider that will that has a little like number value next to it, and also two-dimensional sliders. So I think I'm going to assign that as homework, is to do everything that he has you do. Patch along with him in those tutorials. We'll look at that at the end of class. And that will help you do some things that we won't get to today, like 2D slider and stuff like that, which will set you up pretty good for next week. But I remember, he explains this expression, but I just can't remember it right now. I didn't get it in my notes, unfortunately. All right, but suffice to say, this expression is what is selecting the correct value here from this table. Okay? Slider. Go ahead and dive out of this on your right-hand side. Dive into the slider. And here on the slider, you can see you have panel, which is grabbing these values based on this, your position on the screen. It has an output where it's sending that out, and then there's a knob, and the knob's position is influenced by this panel and a bunch of math. And we'll look at that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so we looked at how we can change the text on this. What if I want the text to change based on whether it's on or off? Yeah. So the first thing I'd want to do is dive inside this button. Let's go ahead and take your split screen and drag one side over, because we need most of our space on the left-hand side, but we still want to interface with this button. Okay, dive out of this slider and dive back into the button on the right-hand side. Okay, so I'm outside here in my main project, and I am inside the button on this project. Okay, I want to change this text to, let's just call it back to button for now. Okay, and we can, let's just leave it the same size. It doesn't matter. I was going to change it back to square, but for now, let's just leave it this rectangular size. So if I want the text to change, right now, everything that's changing inside of this is all driven by this table. It's called color because that's what it's controlling now. We're going to add text to that, but we're just going to leave it named color because we're going to grab some of the expressions that are already in here and just use them in a different way. And we would have to rename them all if we renamed this table. But what we want to do is actually add a column to this for the text that we want to have displayed. So one easy way to do that is to, do you have to have it? Yeah, you have to have it. Viewer active on the color table here. And let me just turn my ringer off. There we go. And now we want to up here on the 3. If I right click, I can say add after, and it will add a new column. And so now if I can put my text here, so the top row is a header row with labels. So I can say text, not test, text. Okay, so that's the label for that. And then I can label these on, off. We'll say on, no, I'm sorry, off is the first one. It's going to be the same thing that's over here. On. Is that mine? What the heck? All right, whatever. Something like standby on. And sorry, that's standby off rather. And no, I was right the first time. Standby on and standby off. And make sure I spell things correctly.
What kind of a dat is color? It's a table.
This is just a table. See, table. Okay. So then, if you go into this button here, and I go to font, or color rather, and you pull down this font color, here is the operation that's grabbing the appropriate color. So what it's doing is it's looking for op color, which is this table here, and then it's looking for int. It's int. So the output of this expression I but that outputs as a string, so it's casting that as an integer. And it looks at the state value coming out of, see how this it's named state. That's the value that this chop has, the channel name rather. So it takes the output of this on channel state and adds 1 to it. So currently right now it's in state 1, and it adds 1 to that and but that comes out of the expression here as a string, and so this casts it as an integer when you say int here, and then it adds 1 to it, and then it is indexing a certain place on this table. So the first value is what I just described, coming out of the expression. Sorry. So this is currently 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2, and then it looks at the second value, which is font. So here. So font 1, 2, and so the font color is 0.9. That's how it finds that, right? If I were to change the state of this button, now you're taking 0 plus 1 on font, and it's 0.73 is the color, right? So that's how it's grabbing things from the table to change the color. We can use this same string, or this same what do they call this, expression, to select the text. So go ahead and copy this selection, this expression, go into text, and where it says text here, click the minus and change it to expression, get rid of the word button, and paste that in there. And now it's putting the value that it pulled from the table. So what we want to do is change which column it's indexing. And here, instead of font, what do you think I would put? Thank you, text. And so now it says off, because it's pulling that from the table. And this should work the same way. So now if I hover over, I get standby on. If I click, I get on. And if I hover over, I get standby off. And if I click, it gets off. Cool? Cool. All right. So if I wanted to, I could change these colors. Right now it's loading the same color on, let's see, so font here and color. So font color, it's loading the same color 3 times on all red, green, and blue. I could change that so that and I could add more columns. Like I could add another column that says font red, font green, font blue, and I could have different values for each of those. And then just here, instead of referencing font on all 3 of them, I reference font red, font green, font blue. And then I could have different colors based on what the state was, right? So that's something you might do in your homework, but I don't want to do right now. And we got the labels. So what if we don't care about this standby on, we just want it to say whether it's on or off? What do you think we should do?
Change standby on to off, and change standby off to on.
Great. Yes. So all I have to do is here on the table just change these to off and on. And now this just says on and off, even if I'm hovering on it. Cool? All right. So what about, how does this get rendered? I mean, how do you see this? How does this work as an interface? So the first thing is any button component, unless you have it disabled or something, will be rendered on your screen in perform mode. It's down here right now. Whoops, I have a slide. Oh, I had that slider in there too. So any of those components, they're being rendered. But if we don't put them in a container, they're a lot harder to deal with as far as like where they are, what size they are, that kind of thing. Let's see, let's get rid of this slider for a minute. All I have to do, I believe, is bypass it. Where's my bypass? I don't have a bypass. Okay, well, let's just delete it then. All right, so if I get rid of that, then I just have this button down here, and it works. And if I wanted to, I could change its position here in layout. So currently it's at X0, Y0. So I could move it to somewhere else, 220 by 430, and now it's over here, right? So you could do it that way, but it would get really complicated to like have to specify the position of every single element exactly in your patch. And if you change the size of your output raster, then it would mess everything up, right? Because you don't have anything relative to the size of your screen. You don't have anything relative to the size of other buttons and stuff like that. You'd have to go and individually edit every single button. That would drive you crazy if you had a lot of buttons. If you just had one, maybe it's not a big deal. But the better way to do it, and the most common way to do it, is rather than just having a button sitting right in your project, is to have a container to put the button or sliders in. So I have a container here. And you can see right here, the container under the Layout tab has its own width and height. So I can grab a button and put it inside the container. Go ahead and copy this button, or cut the button. Dive inside the container and paste it. Okay. Do I still have a button when I go into? Yeah, I still have a button. But now the thing is like if I add other buttons, let me show you something. So go back inside the container here on the buttons, put this back to 0, 0. Okay. Let's add some more. Go ahead and copy and paste your button. Button 2. Button 3. So say let's have 4 buttons. Button 4. Okay, on this container, say I want this to be the size, exactly the size of 4 buttons. What are they right now? They're 100 by 50. So that would be parameters. So I still have my split view right here, right? This is outside the container, and I'm on the parameters of the container. Remember, you hit the P key if you need to bring up your parameter window. If your mouse is over on that side, it'll bring it up on that side. If it's on the right, it'll bring it up on the right. Okay. I can set this container size to be, what would it be if I wanted it to be 2 by 2? It would be 200 by 100. Right? No, that doesn't seem right. What are these again? They are width 100 by height 50. Well, that should be right, right? Why does it look like it's taking up the full screen?
If you look behind you on that projector, you can see that it's not.
I got it wrong. I got these swapped, that's why. This should be 200 width by 100 height. There we go. That's more like what I was looking for. So now, this has enough room for all of our buttons, but what do I see? Hold on. I only see the one button, right? Why do you think that is? Exactly. They're all stacked on top of each other. So I could specify their X and Y position, but that's the same thing as if I didn't have a container. You're not saving any time there. There's some special functions here on the container under children. You can change this align from something like left to right or top to bottom or grid rows. Wait, why is that not working? That should work. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. That's why. None. Sorry. All right, on the container here. Children. Align. Right now it's on none. So if I change it to left to right, it will put them left to right, but they're still stacked on top of each other. So I can say grid rows. And now here we go. I got 4 buttons. And I can interface with each of these buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4. How do I know what order they're in? It's all based on the number after this. So this is button 1, so it's the top left. And if I changed it to grid columns, it's still the top left, but the second one now is the bottom left. Make sense? And so it does that automatically. And you can add like margin spaces and stuff like that in between these buttons to give a more pleasing layout. And so now that I have this container, the container has its own layout position in the main window. And I could even have a second container of buttons. Just go ahead and copy and paste that. And then put this one at a different location. What does this go to? 0 to 200. So let's have this start at 200. Let's just type it in. 200. And so now I have this container here with 4 buttons and this container here with 4 buttons. Right? So I could build up a whole bunch of different buttons that way by putting different containers. And each one of the containers has a certain number of buttons or sliders that has to do with my interface that I'm trying to build. Does that make sense? Any questions on this so far? Okay, cool. Okay, so what to do with this? Well, first off, this keeping track which buttons are which here, when all of them just say off and on, it'd be really nice to have like something that says like button 1 off, button 1 on, button 2 off, button 2 on. We can do that either manually by going in here and let's see, we would have to, here on background, what we would want to do is on text, what would we do? Okay, here's what we would do. We would want to use both the text and this thing called post text. So we can have the text be defined by the name of the object, or at least its digits, because we want it to be the word button plus 1. And then remember, we can get this 1 by going me.digits. So let's try that. So here under background, first of all, let's grab this, which is going to be the off and on stuff, cut it, and paste it down here in post text. So now we get button off. So the first thing we want to do, we want to have a space between button and off, so we can add a space on the main text. That will give us a space. So now it says button space off. We don't yet have that button 1, right? We want that button 1. I could go in every single one and change the text to button space 1 space and just have this post text down here controlling the off and on state. But there's a better way of doing it. And if you do it this way on one button, you can copy and paste as many buttons as you want, and it will change the text automatically, and you won't have to go in on every single one and change them. So make sure are we editing button 1? Yes, we are. I know that because my address up here says container 1 button 1. So make sure you're editing button 1, not button 2 or 3 or 4. Okay? And what we want to do is here under text is we're going to, instead of putting the word button, we're going to pull, we're going to make an expression, and it doesn't like this now. It's mad at me because I'm just putting the word button and it doesn't understand what that is. So you need to first treat this as a string, and you do that by putting single quotes around it. So if I put single quotes around it, I get the same thing, button, right? I want to make a capital B instead of a lowercase b, button. I want to add a space, so I can have a space inside that. Now I have the same thing I had before, but I can also add like the digits. So I can say plus parent, open parentheses, close parentheses, dot digits. I told you me.digits before, and I forgot that this doesn't, the digits are actually included on the parent object one level up. Digits. Right? Now I'm going to do that, and it gets mad, and it says, and I'm like, why is it mad? And I take a look at the error, and it says, can't convert int object to string implicitly. So what's going on? We're mixing our value types here, and it doesn't like it. So it can convert an integer into a string if all it has is integers in there. But if you have a string variable and an integer variable in the same expression, it doesn't know which one is which. It doesn't know what to do, basically. So all we need to do is actually convert this parent digits to a string. And you do that with an str and put it in parentheses. There. And so now it says button 1, but we lost our space. How do we add a space after this when I am defining it by digits? When I'm defining what goes after the word button by digits, which is an integer, I can't easily get a space in there, right? Anybody have an idea? The hint is here is what we did at the beginning of this expression. We have a string that we just implicitly set. So if I wanted to add a space to this, I could just say plus and then put an empty string, which is single quote, space, single quote. Now we get button 1 off, button 1 on. So the off and on, you can see down here on post text, that's being controlled by the post text. Off, on, off, on. Right? So now all we have to do, now that we have this button set up the way we like, we can just delete these other buttons. So go ahead and select all 3 of these buttons. If you're doing a box select, make sure that the first one, you click on one of them first and box select the others, or else you'll accidentally delete your button 1. And now you can just copy and paste this, and you can see it automatically formats it the way we want. Button 2 on, button 3 on, button 4 on, button off. Make sense? Coolio. Okay. What about, how do we get these values? How do I get the values? So this is our main patch, right? Here, let's go back to single pane layout. So up here on pane layout, you click on the single and dive out and make sure you're on your main page here with the containers. And this was our old container. We don't need that anymore. Just have this one container one with the button one off, button one on thing. Okay? What if I wanted to send these values to something? Right now, I can't easily get to them. They're not coming out of this container. Anybody have any idea how I get something out of the container? What? Somebody said it. And out. I tried to give you a hint. You did say select, which is the other way of doing it. And actually, when you get into more organized patches, you'll want to use selects over outs so that you don't have a bunch of patch cords going all over the place, right? Select is like in Max MSP, it's like the send and receives. Is it send and receive in Isadora as well? No? What do you use to send things across? Or do you just have to drop?
No, there's like a small little app there. I forget what it's called.
Okay.
You pretty much have to use OSC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think it's built in.
Okay.
But like, it's the same.
Yeah. So you can set you can use select is what she said. But for now, let's use an out because it's a little bit more simple. But we will look at selects here in a little bit. So we're inside of our container here, right? Project 1, container 1. And we can simply put chop outputs. If you notice what's coming out of this container, if you jump inside the button 1 container, you can see that they have an out here, and it's an out chop. So that means all the data that's coming out of this button is a chop. And they tell you that by making the output green, right? So I can right click on the output and I can go to out, right, like that. And I can do the same thing for each of the other ones. So copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and let's just repatch these to what they need to be. And now I have 4 outputs. When I come out, if I change this off of viewer active, you'll see those 4 outputs right here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so each of these I could, for now, let's like dump them into a null. So I'm just going to do 2 of them. Whoops. I was naming it. So copy, paste, and let's hook the 4th one up to this one. So you can see if I turn my viewer active again, I click on this button, I get a 0 when it's off. When it's on, I get a 1. On 4, I get a 1 when it's on, a 0 when it's off. So I could send these values to different things to do different stuff. A lot of times you'll send it to a script, a dat execute to run scripts. We'll look at that probably at the end of class if we have time. Okay. Another thing you might want to do, instead of having all of these channels independently, we could send one output that's composed of all of the DATs inside of it. And that would be a little bit more elegant way to do it with less patch cords and less objects. And that's the way I generally do it. I like to, instead of having 4 different outputs that I'm going to send 4 different places, I like to merge all of my data channels into one. So go ahead and let's delete 3 of these outputs. So click on out 2 and then box select the other 2. Get rid of them. And we want to, in line here, we want to add a merge chop. And the merge chop can have as many inputs as you want, and it will add those together. Now you can see that all of these are supposed to be outputting a channel called V1 by default. And the same thing happens on button 2, and the same thing on 3 and 4. And then the merge says, wait a second, these are all have the same title, so I'm going to dupe right here based on this thing. duplicate names, I'm going to make those names unique, and it's just going to relabel them. So V1, 2, 3, and 4. What if I wanted those to say B1, 2, 3, 4 for button, or button 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a more descriptive thing? What I want to do is actually inside each button, I'd want to rename those channels coming out to be something that has to do with that particular button, right? So, yeah, where do I do it? Do I have notes on that? I do not. All right, see if I can remember. So you go inside of one of the buttons, and yeah, I think I remember now. In here, before the output, in between this select and the output, we're going to insert an operator, and we are going to put a rename operator. And here it says you want this to be from anything to B button 1, for example. And so now it's called B1. But I want to have this modular. I don't want to hard explicitly call this B1. I want it to be those digits, right? So I can say here on the 2, change this to a string. And I can say I want it to be the string B, right? That makes it a B. And then I can say plus, what was it? It was something about parent digits, right? Parent, what did I do it before? Oh, I did it outside of this, didn't I? I think it's parent, parenthesis, open parentheses, close parentheses, dot digits. And now, is it just about that? Can't convert. So that's the same kind of int string thing. So then we just have to cast this as a string, str, and put it in parentheses. And there we go. Now we have B1 as the channel name. And now if let's go ahead and delete these other other buttons again, and copy and paste this, and go ahead and patch that in. And now I have in my merge here, I have labels that make sense to me. And I know that B0 B1 means that button 1 is off. So now if I click that on, I have 1B1, I have 1B3. World's my oyster. I don't remember what I was doing with that, no. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I'm going to let you guys figure out something to do with these buttons for homework. Let's move on to sliders now. Okay, so sliders. Already did that, already did that. All right, sliders. So let's make a new container. Any questions on this? I hear a lot of whispering. Go ahead and whisper, but if you had any questions or you wanted me to go over anything, that's fine too. Okay, cool. Make another container and go inside the container and add a slider. So that's under comp slider. Okay, now just like the button, we can dive inside the slider and see other things. Let's actually dive out again. Let's make the split view again. And go ahead and drag the division over to the left a little bit so you have more room on the right. I'm going to close my parameter window on this side. And yeah. Now dive into the slider on this side. Okay, so what if I want to, I mean, this works pretty well the way it is. I go ahead and I get a value that goes from 0 to 1, incrementing by floats, right? But what if I wanted this to look different? What if I, first of all, wanted this slider to, instead of getting like, see how it mostly comes off of the edge here? What if I didn't want it to do that? I wanted it to be more contained inside of this slider, and to give it a better graphical look by making the knob not go completely from the top to the bottom, but have like a little gap, little hover. We can change the parameters of this knob to do that. So let's see. First thing we want to do is, yeah, let's go inside this. Sorry, we don't need to go inside. I didn't even know you could go inside the knob. Okay, there's nothing there. Don't go inside the knob. You'll just be disappointed. What we want to do actually is look at the parameters for the knob. So the first thing we could do is we could set the height of this, of the knob. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, great. Yeah. So right now the height is, you can see that this value is blue. And the value is blue because it's set by an expression. If you want to see the expression, you hit the plus key and make sure that the blue expression flag is lit. And you see that it's setting its height based on the parent's height. So it goes completely from the top of the parent object to the bottom. What's the parent object? The slider. This is the knob that we're looking at. The parent is the slider. The sliders, if I go to parameters on this side and I go to layout, the slider currently has a width of 100 with a height of 20. So that's why this height here is 20. Close the parameter on this side. There we go. What did I do? I messed something up. There we go. Okay. So if I wanted this slider to be, let's start with its height. If I wanted it to be like centered but a little bit smaller than the height of the slider so I can get a better look to it, I can say, for example, height minus 40. Did I say 40? I meant 4. All right. So now it has, you can see it's smaller, but its position right now is not centered. So how do we change that? There's some parameters here in the slider that we can adjust to make that centered. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to open up parameters. And I believe it's under children because the knob is a child of this slider. Here under justify vertical, it is set to off. I can set that to center. And now it centers it. See that? So that's cool. That looks nice. Let's close parameters for a minute. Make this active. Next thing I wanted to do is make it not dive off the edge and have the same sort of like margin space here where it stops. But I don't want that to change the value. Like I don't want to change the scope of these variables. I still want the number to go from 0 to 1, but I just want the viewing, the location of this knob to be adjusted. So how the heck is this knob's location set in the first place? And it's actually over here, and it's here on X. So this is its under the layout tab of the container knob. The X value is its position on this slider. So if you open that up to take a look at the expression, it's the parent panel U value times the width minus the panel width of this object divided by 2. So that's a pretty complex expression there, right? We're actually going to simplify this quite a bit. What we're going to do is, instead of pointing to all of this, we're going to create a scaled math object here. So we want to create a branch out of this. And do I have my mouse? And I forgot to use my mouse so far today. And now I wish I was using it, because this would be easier. No, I don't have it. And I don't want to plug in the other one. All right. So you can middle button click out of this to create a new branch. If you don't have a mouse, if you're just using your trackpad, the easiest way is just to create a, what are we making? We're making a math object. You just make a math object outside of it, like that, and then you connect it. That's another way to make a branch if you don't have the middle button on a mouse. And here under range, let's see, yeah. So right now, what I want to do is, I have a from range and a to range. I can leave the from range alone because this goes from 0 to 1, and that's what we already have here. And the to range, instead of going out between 0 and 1, I want this to actually be the width minus the knob's width plus 2. So to get this to work right, I first need to know what's the knob's width. And I could figure all this out and put it in here, but it's a lot better to do it with an expression. So I can create an expression here and change the to range. Why do I have 2? Oh, to range 1 and to range 2. This, first of all, I know it. I want it to start on pixel 2 here. That will put this like here, which is where we want our first point to be. So we can just specify that. But this, where this is going to end up being, might change, especially if we change the width of the slider later on. So I can't just put in 0.95 here as the to range, because I want it to be specified by the width of the slider, which is the parent width in this case when I'm talking about the knob, or I'm talking about this math object. And then I need to have the parent width minus the width of the knob, because I need it to fit inside. So I need to take the parent width minus the width of the knob, and then I'm going to add 2 to it. So that sounds really complicated. It sounds really confusing. It'll make a little bit more sense when we actually do it. So let's just try it. So here on expression, change the to range here from 1. Make sure you have your expression flag highlighted. And we're going to say parent, open close parenthesis, dot width. Now if I just did that, I get the same amount. Or, oh, I get 100, don't I? Oh, and that's what I want. Actually, what I want. Because, why? Because, I can't remember. There is a reason why. It's because this will, shoot. All right. Let's just leave this for a second, and let's go ahead and change our reference here on the knob to make this clear. So the knob, let's see. Okay. So right now the knob's position is set here under this crazy expression here, right? And you can see it's giving me a value of between 0 and 100, not between 0 and 1, because it's multiplying the value by the width of the parent. So the width of the parent is 100 right now, and the value is like 0.95, so when you, or 0.93, so when you multiply 0.93 by the width of 100, you get 93, right? So that's the kind of range of numbers you're looking for, is a number that goes from like 0 to 100, in this case at least, for this x value. So that's why we down here, we did the same thing. We're saying go from 2 to 100, but we actually don't want it to be from 2 to 100. We want it to be 100 minus the width of the knob plus 2. So to do that, we can say minus, now we have to point to the knob's parameters. So right here, we're saying parent dot width, which that will do, you don't have to point to a particular operator there, because it's pointing to whatever the parent of the current object is. So you don't have to point to a specific operator. You could, like I could, instead of saying parent.width, I could say /project1/container2.par.width or something, whatever it is, right? But it's a lot easier just to say parent.width. But we do have to point to a specific operator here in the knob. So, whoops, sorry, we're here. So here on this, I need to say, I need to point to operator, and then you have a open parenthesis, and then a quote, and it's called knob, close quote, close parenthesis, dot par dot width. So we could do that, actually get rid of that first opening parenthesis like that. So there we go. Now this goes, but it still has that overhang. So we actually have to just add 2 to this. So we can put parentheses around this and say plus 2, close parentheses. And then actually we haven't even, this still, even though, so now we've created a range that goes from, you can see here on the math, it goes from 93 to 2, between 2 and 93. And if I hover this thing to 2, you can see that's kind of where we want the knob to be. But what we need to do is actually have this knob here, the x position of the knob, point to this math object now, instead of pointing to the panel value times the width. And so you can just change this to, where is that? Nope, I'll have to figure it out. Okay, so I can change that to math1 instead. So I want to change this x parameter here to op, open parentheses, math1, 1, close quote, close parentheses, and then I actually want to, what is it called? The v1 value, v1. Oh, but that's also, you have to put quotes around that as well. So that's the expression there. And now you can see it's pointing its x position to this math object's value, which is controlled by this expression, right? And you can see it maps to a nice looking, starts at here, ends at here, but the value coming out, because the value coming out is going directly from the panel to the output, it has nothing to do with this math object, so it's not scaling the output, it's just scaling the position of the knob. So that's kind of I wanted to show you, like, you don't really need to do that to make the knob work, but I wanted to show you it because I want you guys to get used to this idea of using expressions and pointing to parent objects and stuff, because it's something you'll do a lot in TouchDesigner. And here's one reason why. So if I have this knob, this slider here, rather, go back into single panel view, dive out of this, go back to your slider, go to layout. So say, what if I wanted this width to be always the width of the panel of the container that it's in? Does anybody have an idea what I could do? So this is the container that it's in, and currently this container size is 400 by 300, and you can see it's only taking 100 pixels of that. What if I wanted it to go all the way across the container? And I didn't want to specify sizes, I just want it to go all the way across the container no matter what the container size is. Anybody have an idea of what I would want to change?
Would you make a width and expression that says container 1 width?
So it's going to be here under the width, right? Because if I change the width here, wait a second. Why is that? That's weird. So if I change this to like 300, okay, yeah, that's right. It's just resizing the camera view, which is what was throwing me off. And I scroll out, then now it's 300 out of the 400. But if I want it to be the entire width, I could just say here, instead of specifying something, I could say parent open close parentheses dot width. And now it'll always be whatever the width of the container is. And this will always scale together. So right now it's, if I change this, see how that scales, even when I make it small, right? And so you can build things with those sorts of references.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So when we were doing the math to get the knob to the right,
Yeah, that was to like get it to
Yeah.
fit inside of this thing and to make
you
it fancy.
You referenced the width as like W?
That's because we grabbed a particular thing. So parent parent open close parentheses dot width is like a I don't know what the official word for it is, but it's like a universal class that always applies to every object. It always will point to the width of your parent object. If you point to, and that points to any parent object, any parent object, no matter what it's called or what its parameters are, it always has a width, parent width. This case, we're pointing over here, we're pointing to a particular operator called knob. And then it has to do with what the parameters of that particular operator are. It doesn't have a parameter called width. It is called width, but actually its scripting name here is W. You can see, right?
Yeah.
And the scripting name is H for height, right? So when we're pointing here, we actually have to talk about the particular parameters of this op. So we say, instead of just parent.width, we're saying op knob, the parameters in that, and the one that's called W. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, it's 2:30. So let's do something a little bit cooler. We're going to create, so we got this slider. And what do we want to do? We want to create a, we want to edit the outputs of this. Yeah, we want to edit the outputs of this. So let's go ahead and create, do we want to do it inside? No, we can do it outside of this slider. So we do have an output on this. It's right here. Right? Now we're going to create, we're going to change this slider to, we're going to create a slider that moves a camera left and right. But first we need something to look at. We need a camera and all that. So actually just leave the slider alone for now. And let's go ahead and on this container. Actually, we'll come back to that. Let's just load in some. Let's load in some objects. So you can, if you have a model handy that you want to look at, you can put that in there, or you can download from the class website. I put one in this week's. I put a Triceratops in this week's. Let's see, Chrome, new window. So if you go to the website and you go to week 4, and you download both this 3tops.object or .obj and triceratops.tiff to get the and I think I don't have it on this computer, so I think I actually have to download this. So download those, and then find where you put them, usually in downloads. And you can drag the 3tops.obj onto here, and you'll get Triceratops. You can drag the TIFF up here, and you'll get a movie file in. And then what do we have to do if we want to texture these? Yeah, materials top. SOP. So material SOP. So material, there it is. And I can't put a top into a material, so I actually have to send this top into a material object. That's called material, or it's a mat, and the one that you most commonly use is a Fong. So you create a Fong, and let's rename this and call it 3tops mat. And now I can grab this Triceratops and drag it into that, and that will bring up this context list, and I can change that to color map. So then it creates a material with that, and then we can, here under material, we can specify 3tops mat as our material, and now we have a Triceratops. Cool? Cool. All right. So if we want this Triceratops to be rendered in our performance mode, right now it's not. We have buttons and sliders and stuff we don't need. Well, we are going to need the slider at least. If we want it to be rendered, what do we need?
Geometry, lights, camera.
Exactly, geometry, lights, and camera. So let's grab all of those. So go ahead and go to comps. You're going to need a geometry, and you'll need a light. You'll need a camera. And what do I do if I want the Triceratops to be inside of the geometry? Yeah, I can either copy all this stuff and put it inside the geometry instead of this torus. I'm going to get rid of the torus regardless. Or the better way, for our purposes anyway, is to put a select SOP. And then to choose the SOP that I want, what was it called? It's, right now it's the material. So actually we want to, let's send this to a null first. So output this to a null. And actually here under this 3tops, let's rename, let's call the null 3tops. But before we do that, we got to rename this. So we'll call this one 3tops mesh. And then over here, call this 3tops. Okay. Then I can go over back into my geometry, and I have my select here. And if I put in 3tops, what happens? Nothing. Yeah, so I have to aim to project 1. So I can do / project 1 / 3tops. Or does anybody remember what the relative reference is? dot dot forward slash, exactly. And that points to it. So dot dot means go back one level. The other one, if you want to go inside of something, like if something is a container, it's a single dot. So if I want to look inside of one level down, it's a single dot. If I want to look one level up, it's 2 dots. So there we go. Now we have this, but we don't see anything unless we set our render flag and our display flag. Now we have that, and now we have cameras and lights. Okay, cool. So here's the thing. If I want to move this camera around like we've done before, and I want it to do a look at, so that it's always looking at the Triceratops so we don't lose the Triceratops, I can, of course, here under camera, sorry, we need a render first. Throw a render top in here. It should automatically do our associations, and this is what will be rendered, is what this render one is seeing, right? So I could, under camera, I could tell it to look at Geo1, and then it will always be looking at geometry 1, but you can see that because this Triceratops isn't like, it's standing on x0 and goes up from there, it doesn't go on the x negative plane, that we're only seeing the top of the, or the bottom of the Triceratops here. And if I change my camera's position by going here on translate, and I want to move this up 1, then it doesn't help, right? It didn't move it. And that's because we're looking directly at the Triceratops no matter what. And I would have to move this way, way up for that Triceratops to seem to be centered. And by that time, he's going to be at a weird angle, and you'll be looking at him from the top, right? So how do I make a look at that looks at a particular place but doesn't look at particularly this geometry? That way I can move the geometry but still have a camera look at 0, 0. The answer is a null component. Create a component called null. Don't need to do anything with it other than here under camera, change your look at from Geo1 to null 1 or null 2 in my case. I don't know why I have a second null. So now this is looking at null 2, which is at 0, 0, and I can change the height of this Geo1. I can move this down 1 here under translate, and now it will, sorry, -1, not +1. There we go. Now this, and now go ahead and on your camera's position, put this back to 0 on the Y, and now he's right in the middle of that. And the camera is always going to be looking at 0, 0, but we could, if we wanted to, move the Triceratops to different positions, and it won't track the Triceratops, but it will always be looking at 0.00, the origin. Right? So let's actually move this camera back a few units, something like 7, so that it fits in the frame. Okay? And woo, we're running out of time. All right, let's see how quickly we can do this. We're not going to be able to do the vertical slider. We just will not have enough time. But there's a great tutorial on it that I want you guys to see. But for now, let's just make the camera move left and right. So, how to do that? So we have our sliders. Where is our sliders? Container 2. Yeah. Container 2, let's go ahead and change this width and height to something a little more sane. Actually, let's just make it have a height of 20 and a width of 100. That's the same. That's like the default size of a slider anyway. This is the container that the slider is in. And we had set the width of the slider based on the width of its parent object, right? Okay, so first thing we want to do, what if we want to add a label behind this slider the same way we did on buttons? We can go in here and we can actually add an object, add a text object. Okay, derivative, change this to, I don't know, L/R cam position. Okay, and let's see. Now what we want to do is here under common, what do you think we want to do here as far as the width and height? Probably has to do with the parents, right? Parent dot width. Wait, that's height, sorry. Dot height, 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 I believe, not height. Height, yeah. Parent dot height. And then for width is parent dot width. Okay? Then, so that will automatically change the resolution of this text object to match the parent width and height. But now we have our text here getting, it doesn't fit. And that's just here under text font size. It's set on 30 size font. So that's a pretty big font. Let's take that down to something like 11 or 8. Let's see, what does 11 look like? Does that fit? No, it doesn't. Let's do 8. There we go. And so then, if I want this slider to show that top, oh, let's name this text, and let's name it background, just like in the buttons they had a top called BG or for background. We're going to make one here called BG, not BF, BG. There we go. Okay, and so then here on the slider one level up, we can go to the look, I believe. Yeah, and here under background top. What's the relative reference for something inside? 1 dot forward slash, what should I put? 1 dot forward slash BG. You guys got it. All right, and there, look at that. So now we have a left-right cam position. Okay. You could also specify, and in the tutorials, he goes on and specifies this text instead of putting it explicitly. He has it, let's just do it really quick. It'll only take a second. Add a table dat here. And this won't really matter for what we're doing, but if you build your sliders this way, you can change the text really easily and stuff. And here, change this, go ahead and make that viewer active on that table, and go ahead and put the same L/R cam position. You can specify this text by, so go back to the text tab on this text object that we have named BG. Go ahead and clear the word LR cam position from the text, and here under, make sure you're not clicking on specification dat, just the regular dat up here in the beginning, at the top. Change that to table 1, and then it automatically updates that based on what's inside this table. And why would you want to do that? Because it's really easy to update the contents of tables. It takes a lot less code than trying to update other parameters inside of other objects. Okay, so we have this, and let's see if we can really quickly, in 3 minutes, connect this to a camera position. So where are we? There we are. Container 2. What do I need? I need an output. Chop out. An out chop. Connect these together. And there we go. And now I have an output. I can pass that to a null. Null. There we go. And we can, here on cam 1, translate the x coordinate on translate. We can point to this null. We can actually just export it, I believe, if we want. So we can put this into viewer active, drag it over here, and say, I like to do chop references instead of exporting chops, which points to op null 3 and looks at the channel called V1. And now if I drag this slider, you can see that it is slightly moving the camera, but it's only moving the camera between 0 and 1. I want it to go from like -10 to +10. Anybody have an idea how I could do that? What? Yeah, I could add a math object, but we could also just edit our expression here, right? So this is creating all this code creates a number that goes between 0 and 1. All we have to do then is multiply that by 20, say. And then it would create a number that goes between 0 and 20. And then if we want to offset that to be in the middle, we could just say -10. And so now it creates a value that goes from -10 to +10. So let's see. These containers, can I bypass a container? No, I don't know how anyway. Wait. Yeah, why can't I bypass in a container? I don't know, I'll have to look into that. But, okay, so we'll have these buttons down here that won't do anything. But let's go ahead and go into your performance mode. Why don't we see anything? Because we don't have an out on our render here. We just need to have an output coming from the render. So now when I go into performance mode, now I have these buttons that don't do anything, and I have this cam position here that does do something. And so say I needed to change the size of that, I could go and change my parameters to make that the size that I want, and I could push that in a different position. It's all here under your containers layout. So here's the buttons. I could push these. What if I stuck these at -100? Would that put it off the screen? I bet you it would. And then I take this one and put let's see, I can change its width to something bigger. And now when I go in there, I have a bigger, nope. I didn't go far enough on these ones. So yeah, I can get it off the screen if I say go to -1000. That'll get it off the screen. There we go. And now I just have this left-right cam position, and I can use that as an interface. Okay? So your homework. Homework is to go through these tutorials. If you go to YouTube and you search for TouchDesigner button, you'll see these interface elements, button customization by Matthew Reagan. You want to do this one here, and I'll put the links on the website tonight. But do this one, and then he has one on, if you go TouchDesigner slider, horizontal slider. So do the button tutorial and patch along with him. Do the horizontal slider tutorial and the vertical slider tutorial. So they're all the top results on all three of those. I'll put the links on the website. So do all three of those tutorials, and then I want you to, and also if you want, yeah, let's do that as well. And then I also want you to do there'll be a 2D slider that he shows you how to do.
So now I've got a
Sorry. 2D slider. Okay, great. It's the top result for that as well. So do all three of those. And yeah, and then find something interesting to control with the, so maybe with the cam position, create the vertical slider and change and map that to the vertical position of the camera. And then find something interesting to do with the buttons, right? In his examples, he'll show you how to use this output of the buttons to do something called a execute DAT, which you can use to do different things. See if you can't figure out something on that. If not, you can probably take the output of the button and multiply it by something and have that change something. That would work too. Okay? But yeah, just do something interesting with the buttons and do those tutorials and patch along with them on those tutorials. Okay? So you'll be turning in each one of the patches that you patched along on the tutorials, and then you'll be turning in something like this. It doesn't have to be a Triceratops. It can be anything you want with a vertical slider and a horizontal slider that maps to like camera controls, or you could make it move an object or something like that. Okay, cool. I'll update the website with more specific requirements so that you have this in writing, and I'll put the links on it as well. All right, any questions? Awesome.